Power, respect, absolute control. When you command the most dangerous syndicate in all of New York, you expect the world to bow at your feet. But Matteo Valenti never saw it coming, that his most humiliating moment and his greatest obsession would be sparked by a plus-size waitress in a cramped Manhattan restaurant, a woman who spoke his mother tongue with flawless, effortless grace. The fluorescent lights buzzed relentlessly in the back kitchen of Trattoria Bellini, casting a harsh, unforgiving glare over the chaos of the dinner rush. Sienna wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead with the back of a flour-dusted wrist. At 240 pounds, the physical toll of a double shift in a high-end, fast-paced Italian restaurant was no joke. Her thick thighs chafed beneath the cheap black fabric of her uniform skirt, and her lower back throbbed with a dull, persistent ache she had long learned to push aside. She was undeniably fat, a truth she carried with quiet acceptance, though the sharp sting of societal judgment still found its way in from time to time. What Sienna lacked in conventional beauty, however, she more than made up for in sheer, unstoppable competence. She weaved through the cramped spaces between tables with remarkable ease, balancing 3 scalding plates of veal ossobuco on her left arm and a massive tray of antipasti in her right hand. She knew the menu backward and forward. More importantly, she knew the neighborhood. Trattoria Bellini wasn't just a spot for wealthy tourists on Fifth Avenue. It was neutral ground for some of the city's most ruthless men. Tonight, the air in the main dining room was completely sucked out by the arrival of one party. Matteo Valenti didn't simply walk into rooms, he claimed them. As heir to the Valenti family, a syndicate with deep, bloody roots stretching back to the old-world Cosa Nostra in Palermo, he moved with the predatory grace of a man who held the city's lifeblood in his hands. He was a figure sculpted from violence and expensive tastes, dressed in a custom-tailored charcoal Brioni suit that clung to his broad shoulders, his dark hair slicked back impeccably. Flanked by his 2 top lieutenants, Giorgio and Paolo, he commanded attention without saying a word. Whispers rippled through the restaurant like a wave. Cutlery was set down quietly. Diners suddenly became fascinated with their own shoes, terrified of making accidental eye contact. The maitre d', a usually pompous man named Carlo, practically tripped over his own feet in his rush to guide Matteo's party to the VIP booth. Tucked in the shadowy corner of the restaurant, Sienna had been assigned to their section. "Don't mess this up, Sienna," Carlo hissed, his face pale and slick with nervous sweat as he intercepted her near the espresso machine. "That's Valenti, Matteo Valenti. If his wine is poured wrong or his steak is overcooked, he won't just leave a bad review. He'll burn this place to the ground with us inside it." "I know who he is, Carlo," Sienna replied, her voice steady. She grabbed a fresh cloth, adjusted her apron over her wide hips, and took a deep breath. She wasn't intimidated by men in expensive suits. She had spent a decade of her childhood in a small coastal town near Catania, Sicily, living in hiding with her late father, a disgraced forensic accountant who had crossed the wrong people. She knew the mafia, their posturing, their unspoken rules, and most importantly, their language. Approaching the table, Sienna kept her expression perfectly neutral. Matteo sat at the center of the booth, leaning back against the red leather, casually twirling a heavy silver lighter between his long fingers. Giorgio and Paolo flanked him, their eyes scanning the room like hawks. "Good evening, gentlemen," Sienna said, producing a notepad. "Welcome to Trattoria Bellini. Can I start you off with some sparkling water or a bottle from our reserve list?" Matteo didn't look up immediately. He finished lighting a thick, imported cigar, blatantly ignoring the city's indoor smoking laws, knowing no one would dare enforce them on him. He exhaled a plume of blue smoke, and slowly his dark, calculating eyes drifted upward. His gaze raked over her, not with interest, but with a thorough, degrading appraisal. He took in her round face, the thick curves of her waist, and the way her apron strings dug into the soft flesh of her sides. A cruel, arrogant smirk touched the corner of his lips. He turned to his men and, instead of addressing her in English, shifted effortlessly into a rapid, thick Sicilian dialect, the kind of hyper-regional slang that even mainland Italians struggled to comprehend. "Guardate questa," Matteo sneered to Giorgio, his voice dripping with aristocratic contempt. "Look at this one. They feed the pigs exceptionally well in America. I'm surprised she can even walk to the table. We'd better order double, or she'll eat half our plates in the kitchen before they even reach us." Giorgio and Paolo chuckled low and guttural, sharing a look of cruel amusement. They assumed, as everyone did, that this overweight, thoroughly American-looking waitress with the name tag, Sienna, was just another clueless local, completely ignorant of the venom being spit right in front of her face. Sienna's pen froze on the paper. For a fraction of a second, the humiliation burned hot in her chest. It was a familiar, tired script. Society always reduced her to her size, stripping away her intellect, her history, and her dignity simply because she carried extra weight. But the humiliation vanished instantly, eclipsed by a surging, icy wave of pure defiance. Her father had taught her the Sicilian dialect to survive, to understand when the wolves were at the door. He hadn't taught her to cower. She took a slow, deliberate breath, letting the heavy silence stretch for one agonizing second. Sienna did not look away. She did not blush. She did not retreat. Instead, she clicked her pen shut with a sharp, echoing snap that cut through the low hum of the dining room. She leaned forward slightly, resting her knuckles on the edge of their white-clothed table, bringing herself uncomfortably close to Matteo's personal space. When she spoke, her voice wasn't the polite, high-pitched customer service tone she had used moments before. It was low, raspy, and laced with the exact same harsh, rolling, regional accent Matteo had just used. Sienna fired back in Sicilian, absolutely flawless, the rolling R's and clipped vowels hitting the air like pistol shots. "If you paid as much attention to your manners as you do to my waistline, Don Valenti, you wouldn't be eating at a table by the kitchen door like a peasant." The effect was instantaneous. Paolo choked on his glass of water, coughing violently into his napkin. Giorgio's hand immediately dropped beneath the table, his instinctual reaction to a perceived threat sending his fingers straight to the grip of his concealed firearm. But Matteo froze. The silver lighter slipped from his fingers, clattering loudly against the fine china on the table. The cruel smirk was violently wiped from his face, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated shock. His dark eyes widened, snapping up to meet hers. For the first time all evening, he wasn't looking at a fat waitress. He was looking at a ghost. He was looking at an equal. The heavy, oppressive silence stretched between them. The surrounding tables seemed to vanish. "Chi diavolo sei?" Matteo demanded, his voice dropping an octave as he slipped back into the dialect. "Who the hell are you?" "I am the woman taking your order," Sienna replied in English, seamlessly shifting back to her professional demeanor, though her eyes blazed with unapologetic fire. "Now, we have a fantastic tomahawk ribeye on special tonight. Or if you're worried about my appetite, I can bring you a simple garden salad. Your choice." Giorgio half stood, his face turning an angry shade of crimson. "You insolent little—" "Sit down, Giorgio," Matteo commanded softly. He didn't raise his voice, but the absolute authority in his tone caused his lieutenant to drop back into the booth instantly. Matteo's eyes never left Sienna's. The initial shock was melting away, slowly replaced by a burning, intense curiosity. The air crackled with a sudden, dangerous electricity. He leaned forward, bracing his elbows on the table, studying the fierce defiance in her round face, the set of her jaw, The way she refused to break eye contact despite knowing exactly who he was and what he was capable of. Women in his world were usually slender, heavily manicured, and terrifyingly submissive. They agreed with him. They feared him. This woman did neither. Did. Catania, Matteo murmured, testing the sound of the word. He recognized the specific inflection in her accent. It wasn't just general Sicilian. It was Eastern, straight from the streets of Catania. You learned to speak on the eastern coast. Who taught you? My father, Sienna answered, keeping her tone clipped and guarded. And he taught me that true men of respect don't need to insult the working class to feel powerful. Matteo let out a sudden bark-like laugh that startled even his own men. It wasn't a mocking laugh. It was genuine, the sound of a man who was utterly, completely captivated. I apologize, Matteo said smoothly, switching to perfect, unaccented English. He moved his water glass to the side, clearing the space between them as if removing a barrier. You are right. It was a crude peasant's remark. I am Matteo. I know who you are. The whole city knows who you are. Is a traitor, Sienna said, unyielding. And yet you stand here lecturing me, Matteo observed, a dangerous smirk returning to his lips, though this one was devoid of the earlier disgust. It was predatory, intrigued. Tell me your name. Sienna? She replied. Your last name? Sienna from Catania. Sienna hesitated. Her last name was Evans, adopted by her father after they fled. But giving him any personal information felt like handing a loaded gun to a madman. Just Sienna. Now are you ordering, or are you just going to interrogate me while my other tables wait? Matteo held her gaze for several long seconds. He was a man who took what he wanted, and right now he realized with a strange, twisting sensation in his chest that he wanted to know absolutely everything about this woman. He wanted to know how she carried her weight with such armor, how she had learned his language, and how she managed to make him feel utterly off balance with a single sentence. The ribeye, Matteo finally said, leaning back. Rare. And bring 2 bottles of your best Barolo. Right away, Sienna said, turning on her heel. And Sienna, Matteo called out just as she took a step. She paused, looking back over her shoulder. Matteo's eyes were dark, tracking the curve of her hips as she stood her ground. You are the only one who serves this table tonight. Nobody else. Do you understand? Sienna didn't nod. She just gave him a sharp, knowing look and walked away toward the kitchen. As the swinging doors closed behind her, Matteo Valenti reached down and picked up his silver lighter. He ignited it, staring into the small flame. For the first time in years, the ruthless boss of the Valenti family wasn't thinking about territory, money, or blood. He was thinking about a waitress who had just put him perfectly, beautifully in his place. Service dragged on through the rest of the grueling shift. But the atmosphere inside Trattoria Bellini had fundamentally shifted. Every time Sienna stepped out of the kitchen, she felt the heavy, undeniable weight of Matteo Valenti's gaze tracking her. He didn't stare like a predator waiting to strike. He watched her like a man trying to decipher a complex, ancient text. He noted the way she carried the heavy trays without a tremor, the way she effortlessly commanded the busboys in rapid Spanish, and the proud, unyielding posture she maintained despite her obvious exhaustion. When Matteo's party finally rose to leave late into the night, Carlo, the maitre d', practically bowed them out. Matteo didn't spare Carlo a single glance. He walked straight up to Sienna, who was wiping down a nearby table. He reached into the inner breast pocket of his bespoke suit, pulled out a thick linen envelope, and slid it onto the polished wood under her rag. For the exceptional service, Matteo murmured, his voice a low rumble, and the education. Before she could respond, he was gone, sweeping out the glass doors onto Fifth Avenue with Giorgio and Paolo trailing like shadows. Sienna opened the envelope. Inside was a stack of crisp $100 bills, easily $5,000, and a sleek black business card with a single gold-embossed phone number on it. Nothing else. Later that night, the restaurant was locked, and Sienna stepped out into the biting chill of a New York night. Rain had begun to fall in icy, stinging sheets, slicking the pavement of West 46th Street. She pulled her worn wool coat tightly around her generous curves, exhausted to her very bones. Her apartment in Astoria, Queens, felt like a million miles away. A sleek, midnight black Lincoln Navigator suddenly idled to the curb beside her, its tires hissing against the wet asphalt. The tinted rear window rolled down with a soft mechanical hum, revealing Matteo Valenti in the dimly lit leather interior. "Get in, Sienna," he said. It wasn't a request. It was a statement of fact. "I take the N train, Don Valenti. I don't get into cars with the syndicate," she replied, gripping her oversized tote bag, the rainwater already flattening her hair against her cheeks. "It's pouring, and the N train is stalled at Queensboro Plaza due to a signal failure," Matteo countered, opening the heavy door from the inside. "I am not asking you to join the family. I am offering a woman who works on her feet all night a dry ride home. Do not insult my hospitality twice in one evening." Sienna hesitated. Her feet were screaming in agony, and the cold was seeping through her shoes. With a heavy sigh that conveyed her immense reluctance, she climbed into the sprawling back seat, bringing a gust of cold rain with her. The door clicked shut, enveloping her in the rich scent of fine leather, expensive cologne, and danger. "Astoria," she told the driver through the partition, not looking at Matteo. As the SUV smoothly merged into the desolate late-night traffic, the silence between them was thick and charged. Matteo poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter built into the console, offering one to her. She took it cautiously. "Evans is a fake name," Matteo stated quietly, staring out the window at the blurred city lights. "I had Paolo make a few calls while we ate our ribeye. Sienna Evans doesn't exist in any records from before she appeared here. But a girl named Sienna Rossi, daughter of Victor Rossi, vanished from Catania right around that time." Sienna's blood turned to absolute ice. The glass in her hand trembled. Victor Rossi, her father, the brilliant forensic accountant who had discovered $3 million missing from the Lucchese family's offshore accounts, only to realize the theft was an inside job by a treacherous underboss. To save his life and hers, Victor had stolen the ledgers as insurance and fled to America. He had died of a heart attack some time ago, taking the location of the ledgers to his grave. "If you know who I am," Sienna whispered, her voice tight with suppressed terror, "then why am I still breathing? The Lucchese family has a bounty on the Rossi name." Matteo turned his head slowly, his dark eyes locking onto hers in the shadowy cabin. "Because the Lucchese family are animals, and I am a businessman. And more importantly, because I do not care about a dead man's ledgers. I care about the woman who stood up to me." He shifted closer, erasing the distance between them on the wide bench seat. He reached out his large, warm hand, gently taking the trembling glass from her fingers and setting it aside. His gaze dropped to her waist, then back up to her eyes. "You carry a heavy burden, Sienna," Matteo said softly. "You hide in plain sight, making yourself invisible in a city that only values thin, fragile illusions. But you are not an illusion. You are substantial. You are brilliant. You are real." To her shock, his hand came to rest lightly on her thick thigh, a gesture not of aggression, but of profound reverence. He wasn't disgusted by her size. He was captivated by her gravity. "I don't need your protection," Sienna said, though her voice wavered at his touch. "You don't," Matteo agreed, a fierce smile playing on his lips. but you are going to let me court you anyway." The underworld of New York City quietly began to shift on its axis. Matteo Valenti was relentless. He didn't send her superficial bouquets of roses. He sent her things she actually valued. First, it was a first-edition copy of an Italian cookbook she had mentioned in passing. Then it was a deed to a small, struggling bakery in Brooklyn that had belonged to a friend of her late father. The mortgage mysteriously paid off in full. He visited Trattoria Bellini regularly, sitting in her section, speaking to her in rapid-fire Catanian dialect, slowly peeling back the layers of her defensive armor. Sienna found herself falling for the ruthless mob boss. Beneath the violence and the bespoke suits, Matteo was an intellect who matched her own. He respected her mind, and in the dark, quiet corners of his penthouse overlooking Central Park, he worshipped her body with a devastating, consuming passion that made her forget every cruel insult she had ever endured about her weight. But not everyone was enchanted by the new arrangement. Giorgio, Matteo's fiercely traditional lieutenant, viewed Sienna as a massive liability. He couldn't fathom why the Don was obsessed with an overweight working-class waitress who happened to be the daughter of a marked man. To Giorgio, Sienna was a spy, a Lucchese plant waiting to destroy the Valenti Empire from the inside. On a night when Trattoria Bellini was closed for renovations, funded entirely off the books by Matteo Valenti, Sienna was alone in the kitchen testing a new recipe for ricotta cannoli. The heavy steel door at the back of the alley groaned open. Sienna didn't turn around immediately, assuming it was the night delivery driver. "Put the flour by the walk-in, please," she called out. The distinct click of a pistol hammer being pulled back echoed through the tiled kitchen. Sienna froze. She turned slowly to see Giorgio standing by the prep tables, his silencer-equipped Glock pointed directly at her chest. His face was twisted in a mask of pure hatred. "The boss has lost his mind," Giorgio spat, stepping further into the fluorescent light. "He's weak. He's letting a fat, worthless rat from Catania dictate his moves. The Lucchese family reached out to me today, Sienna. They know you're alive. They know who your father was. They offered us a truce, new territory in Brooklyn, if we just hand you over." Sienna's heart hammered against her ribs. But the survival instincts her father had beaten into her flared to life. She didn't scream. She slowly wiped her flour-covered hands on her apron. "Matteo said no," Sienna deduced, keeping her eyes locked on Giorgio's weapon. "Matteo told them to go to hell." Giorgio snarled. "He's going to start a war over you, a war we can't afford. So I am going to fix this. I am going to put a bullet in your head, dump you in the East River, and tell the boss the Luccheses got to you first." "Giorgio," Sienna said, her voice dropping into that icy, commanding Sicilian tone she had used on her very first night. "You are making a colossal mistake. You think my weight makes me slow. You think my apron makes me helpless." "I think you talk too much," Giorgio snapped, raising the gun. Sienna didn't wait for him to pull the trigger. With terrifying speed, fueled by pure adrenaline, her hand shot out, grabbing a massive, searing hot cast-iron skillet resting on the industrial stove beside her. In one fluid motion, she hurled the heavy pan and the pool of boiling duck fat inside it directly at Giorgio's face. Giorgio screamed a horrific, gurgling sound as the boiling oil caught him across the eyes and neck. The gun went off wildly, the bullet shattering the espresso machine behind Sienna in an explosion of ceramic and steam. Blinded and in agonizing pain, Giorgio dropped the weapon, clawing at his blistered face. Sienna didn't hesitate. She grabbed a solid wooden rolling pin from the counter, closed the distance, and swung it with all her considerable weight, cracking it hard against the side of Giorgio's knee. He collapsed to the floor, whimpering, utterly neutralized by the woman he had just called a worthless rat. The back door suddenly slammed open again. Matteo burst into the kitchen, his own weapon drawn, his chest heaving. with Paolo right behind him. He had tracked Giorgio's phone, suspecting a betrayal, but he expected to find a tragedy. Instead, Matteo froze in his tracks. The scene before him was straight out of a Renaissance painting of vengeance. Giorgio was writhing on the floor, groaning in agony. Standing over him, breathing heavily, flour dusting her face and a massive wooden rolling pin clenched in her hand like a scepter, was Sienna. She was completely unharmed, her dark eyes blazing with a ferocity that took Matteo's breath away. Paolo lowered his gun, his mouth hanging open in sheer disbelief. He looked at the 240-pound waitress, then down at the seasoned mafia hitman crying on the floor. Matteo slowly holstered his weapon. A slow, dark, incredibly proud smile spread across his face. He walked past the moaning Giorgio, not even giving his former lieutenant a second glance, and stepped up to Sienna. He gently took the rolling pin from her grip and tossed it onto a metal prep table with a loud clatter. "I told you," Sienna breathed, her hands shaking slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. "I don't need your protection." "I know, Mia Regina," Matteo murmured, cupping her round face in his large hands. "My queen. I know. You are the most terrifying, magnificent creature I have ever known." He kissed her deeply and fiercely amidst the smell of gunpowder, shattered espresso, and hot oil. It was a seal of absolute devotion. Matteo broke the kiss and looked down at Giorgio. His voice turned to cold steel. "Paolo, clean this garbage up. If he survives the burns, take him to the warehouse. He will beg for death by the time I am done with him." "Yes, boss," Paolo said quickly, rushing forward. He looked at Sienna with a newly minted, profound respect. "Are you okay, Miss Sienna?" "I'm fine, Paolo," she said, straightening her apron. "Just a little mess in my kitchen." Matteo wrapped his arm around her thick waist, pulling her flesh against his side. He didn't care about the flour ruining his suit. He had finally found his equal. The Valenti family was about to face a war with the Lucchese syndicate. But as Matteo looked at the fierce, brilliant, unapologetic woman in his arms, he knew they wouldn't just survive it. They would conquer it all. Because New York was about to learn a very hard lesson. You never, ever underestimate a Sicilian woman, especially one who knows exactly how much space she deserves to take up. Did you see that twist coming? Sienna absolutely destroyed Giorgio and proved she is not someone to mess with, completely flipping the script on the mafia boss trope. If you loved seeing this fierce, curvy queen claim her throne and put the underworld in its place, smash that like button right now. Share this video with fellow mafia romance fans, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another epic, pulse-pounding story. Drop a comment below with your favorite moment.